Right, we're back once again here, brought to you by 65 Hurls. Go to 65hurls.com to get your sticks. Obviously the games are back flying, so you have to make sure you're ready for them. We're going to talk about the best hand in hurling, the best man in the air. There's some amount of brilliant catchers over the years. I mean, the Cork half backline of the noughties comes to mind. You know, Sean O'Halpine, Ronan Curran, John Gardner, Tommy Walsh, JJ Delaney, Brian Hogan. You know, there's so many brilliant ones down through the years. Tony Doran comes to mind. Everyone remembers his brilliant right hand back in the 80s. And even just, you know, Dan Shanahan. I mean, there are so many options over the years, aren't there?
Unbelievable, yeah. Like Tony Doran is the one that springs to mind for me when you're looking back at the old matches. They just lorry ball in on top of him, and invariably he was able to catch it and barrel it over the line in some way. Of other ones of recent era, anyone who's played against Willie Hyland of Laois, Clockballochcalla would know how good he is in the air. Same as Tony Doran, and actually same as Garrett Magic Johnson from Down, who I mentioned as well. They're all left-handers, and you have that advantage of being able to come in behind the defender almost and go in at the last second, which Dan was really good at doing, even though he was a traditional kind of a right-hander as well. But anybody that watches the intros to the Our Game videos should not be confused. That was the only time I can ever recall you catching a high ball. So anybody that thinks that you're very good in the air like that is totally mistaken.
Now, if I didn't have the ability to catch a high ball, I wouldn't have that at all. And maybe I don't have that at all. But like, what makes a person good in the air? Like for me, I think it's when that ball is travelling through the air, and we're talking about the long 50-50 balls, that's where a guy really kind of shows out of how good he is in the air. But when that ball is still, 60 yards in the sky, when it's still a couple of seconds away from you, I think the big thing is to actually just be attacking the ball and almost disregarding everyone else around you, so that when you get up and catch it, you're catching it at as high a possible point as you can. And I think so many lads around you on the field are not good in the air. They almost wait for it to just hit the floor. They don't want to get themselves into bother. They just want to be there for the break. Now then there are other guys who go at it differently, and they sort of play the man and lean in on the shoulder and sort of, you know, then catch the ball out the side of them. Or a lot of good forwards out there, they'll try and let the corner back, we'll say, out in front of them, and they'll sort of give them the little nudge catch, and they're actually in on goal straight away. For you, how would you go attacking a high ball?
Just what you were saying there, I think the most important word that sums it up is timing, really. I think if you're able to time the flight of the ball, the last thing, and you've been in a situation, and I've definitely been in a situation, is where you're caught under the ball.
Oh, I got slated for the All-Ireland final.
Yeah, it's a disaster because you're there and you're going up for the ball and you're literally thinking, oh, I'm goosed here. There's no way I can win this ball. I'm after getting caught kind of flat-footed. I'm not at my highest point and my feet are nearly on the ground. And then all it just takes is someone to come in with a little dart at the last second that's judging the ball, and they take the ball over you. I actually sent you on a clip last year for another show when it was Kevin Downs' catch over you. Actually,
that's what I was going to say.
But there's nothing worse than being in that situation. So like, even if you're not trying to catch the ball and you're just trying to get a touch on the ball or spoil, it's all about timing. It's all about having the contact just at the right second, just when the ball is coming. Because like, if you're too late, the ball is in someone's hand. If you're just as the ball is coming, you can take all momentum and you can just clear everything around you. But timing is probably the one thing that's probably more than anything else. And it's a thing, it's a fine art, because someone throwing up a ball between me and you, that's grand. We're both able to time it. We know how it's coming down, the ball is going to drop and whatever.
Only one winner.
A ball, yeah, yeah. And a ball coming from a keeper, it's going to be in the air maybe 3 or 4 seconds or whatever, and you have to be able to time it perfectly, or you like if you don't time it perfectly, your man has the ball and they're gone and they're on the front foot and you're still standing there.
Yeah, other guys that come to mind, Ken McGrath, Lara Corbett. I mean, people obviously message us in and tell us who we're leaving out here. But is the catching of a high ball a bit of a dying art, because the game has moved from just truck puck outs, 50-50 ball, that people are trying to work it up the field, or there's crisscrossing movements, you're trying to hit the ball into grass, or like even I think of Nicky Quaid, he hits a lot of, like his half forward line would fold in, he'll hit puck outs that basically bounce in front of the full forward line who comes sprinting out. So are those opportunities to catch the 50-50 balls, are they disappearing?
Yeah, well, I suppose a team like Limerick, we were kind of going down through it, and Aaron Gillane was the standout catcher that we had. It was probably the best paw that they have, and he's in the inside line, so he's not going to be under a puck out. While Gerard Hegarty's a big man, and Kyle Hayes is a big man, and Tom Morrissey's as well, probably not known for catching ball. And when we looked at Clare then as well, we're thinking, who are their kind of main fielders? And you're seeing maybe David Fitzgerald's gone up centre forward now this year, and they're maybe going to look at a bit more long ball. But invariably, a lot of teams are working it through the lines. They're trying to put ball into space there, as you say. They're playing a different way. Maybe when the pressure comes on and there's a really, really tight squeeze, they have to go at long ball. But it's definitely not option A. So teams are trying to avoid those scenarios. If you don't have a big catcher, I know with Burr, we had Gary Hannafy for over 15 years. And you knew whether he was playing centre forward or wing forward, that if you could isolate him at all, you had a great chance of winning the puck out. And you probably take it for granted when you have it. And when he doesn't catch one, you're almost like, Gary, what's the story? You're 6'4" or 5, you didn't catch it. Whereas the whole attention is focused on him not catching the ball from the other team. But when you don't have one, it's very, very difficult. It forces you to totally rejig the way you play. If you're going to have probably 30, 35 puckouts in a game, like, you're going to have to reassess everywhere you're going to hit, whether it's the cornerback, the wing back, or to the midfield or whatever. But if you're not competent with the half forwards that you have to catch a ball, invariably teams will play a different way.
It's like nothing causes pandemonium in GA quite like catching a high ball in the opposition half of the field, because if you can turn in and create a 2-on-1 straight away, if you're a half forward or if you're in the inside line, goal is on straight away. Another reason why I wonder, is it a dying art to some degree, is I presume you grew up down the local park in Burr, and it'd be the same down Bursley, where you could have 10 lads down there, one lad pucks the ball up in the air, the rest of the lads are all under it. So there's a real dog-eat-dog way of learning this trade. I wonder if that happening to the same degree. Now, I'm sure it's definitely happening, but is it happening everywhere the way it might have before?
I wouldn't say it's happening to the same degree now. People are more to do with like flicks and kind of crossbar challenges and things like that. Whereas, just a funny one actually, Lester Ryan, the captain Kilkenny to All-Ireland glory in 2014, he was down in UL with me. He lived up in a place across the bridge called Capavilla. Or if he didn't live there, he was up there the whole time. And him and another fella, Michael Rafter, they used to bait balls up between them and I forget who the third person was. And they literally they'd break hands. They'd have no apologies about breaking hands. It was just all about catching ball up between two lads, and they'd kill each other. I think Conor Matton, that played with Offaly, Leinster Kilcormac, was involved in it one night, and I think he came away fairly black and blue at the end of it, and he's a big man. But that's what lads were doing, 10 or 15 years ago, or as you say, 20 years ago. Not as much now. So no more than, if you're happy that you're competent at the skill, you'll have no problem putting your hand up because you've practiced it. If you don't practice it, you're going to be more looking for the silky kind of touches and flicks and that type of thing. So it's probably not practice as much now. But if you're good at it, it's invaluable if you're good at it. As you said, if you didn't have a hand, maybe you wouldn't have much. But as long as you have a hand, you'll always have something to offer. That's a fact. It's no more than a good free taker or a good sideline taker. If you can stay playing until you're 50, if you have those skills. It's the same with having a good paw. You can still say, oh, we'll throw Stapleton in. I know he's 50 and he's hardly able to move. We'll throw him in full forward, he might catch a ball. And you might.
I hope you're my manager someday. Well, okay, right. With Limerick, Aaron Gillane is the obvious one. I think David Dempsey from Napiershik, he's another lefty and you've mentioned how good they can be. He's brilliant in the air.
What is it? Is there some scientific reason? Is it just because lefties are going with the other hand and it causes something different, or what is it that makes they're left-handed, obviously catching in the right? What makes them so difficult to defend? Is it just because it's something different?
I think it is, because if the vast majority of people are right-handed, so they're going up with their left hand, you're absolutely thrown off your game altogether if you're going on someone who's catching on the other side. Whereas for the lefty, he generally is marking people that are right-handed. So he gets to practice all the time against people that have the conventional hand. Whereas for us, it's a lot more unusual. So I think it's something to do with that. It's almost
the more than a southpaw in boxing, isn't it? It's more than a southpaw in boxing, or a left-handed tennis player where the serve goes out swinging and causes the right-hander a lot more trouble. I suppose it's probably the same.
And like the good boxers, if you can switch stance and go up for a high ball, throw the hurley over into the other hand and catch that way, no harm to be able to do that either. Not too many do.
That's the odd. You'd rarely see it at county level, but you might see lads at club level. Say you have a Gerard Hegarty. I don't know if he's done it now, but he's 6'4" and everyone's expecting him to catch in his left hand. just say he makes a switch at the last second, you might get Rory Hannafy actually used to do it with Burr. He used to put his right hand up and switch because he'd be under a puck out in half order and he'd switch at the last second because you're far more less likely to get a belt because all the energy was concentrated on your dominant hand, your dominant catching hand.
Was it against Antrim that John Troy did the thing where he caught it in his right hand and he was able to throw it up and swing from 40 yards over? Like, I love when a player is able to do the switch hand for the catch, throw it up and in one motion just be able to strike it on their normal side and make it look like poetry in motion.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's an unbelievable skill to be able to have. But again, that's all about timing, and it's all about being unbelievably proficient at the skill. If you're that confident that you can do that, you obviously have practiced it an awful lot. Because imagine somebody that hadn't practiced it and they'd be switching hurls and they wouldn't know what they're doing. But it's definitely a skill to have, or a skill that people will use at club level anyway, to kind of switching hands.
Yeah, so there's probably a few more in Limerick that are quite good in the air, but I'm not sure that too many of them get the same amount of opportunities as Aaron Gillane to field ball in dangerous areas. And as I said, the puckouts generally, well, they're not throwing up 50-50 puckouts. You'd imagine Grode Hegarty can catch them, Tom Morrissey, Kyle Hayes, but it is definitely far more Aaron Gillane. Diarmuid Burns then at the other end feel like he'd be able to catch a few. And I think a special mention to Mike Casey, not necessarily because he's catching high ball all the time, but because when everyone thought Johnny Glynn couldn't be stopped in the air, he found a way to spoil him. So actually knowing how to spoil someone in the air, it's different to having the best hand, but it's actually, you can't underrate that.
It's a completely different skill, but it's unbelievably efficient as well and useful. Like if you're marking, I remember marking Derek Honan one day. We were playing UCC in a Waterford Bristol match with UL, and obviously he was 6'7", and literally he put his hand up and you just slap it away. You were just trying to slap it away at the last second. He's put his hand up and you're just kind of playing it. That's all you were doing, because like if he puts his hand up and you try to do anything else, you're going to be made an absolute fool of. So that's literally all you're trying to do. That's all about kind of timing as well. They always said that Tommy Walsh was very, very good, whether this is true or not, he'd almost hit your helmet a little kind of a dig as he was going up, just a little small little one, and it would just cause your head to move. And you know, as I was saying about contact earlier, once your head moves or once your eyes are taken off the ball, forget about it, because your eyes have to be on the ball the whole time. So that was kind of the art of the spoiling as well. You mentioned JJ Delaney as well, probably the best defensive catcher anyway I'd say I've ever seen. We talked about Dan Shanahan, who's like that's how good JJ is. Dan Shanahan was brilliant in the air, and JJ was able to totally neutralise him, not just neutralise him and spoil him, but actually dominate him in the air. And
same with Liam Rush. Remember Liam Rush went full forward in 2012, and he was obviously and continues to be very good in the air, and he had a very tough time against JJ, who not only was stopping him but snapping ball over him too, which is no mean feat. Actually, just looking at some of the Dublin options here, Sean Moran, very good in the air, of course, as I know well. Chris Crummy, very good in the air. Conal Keeney and Danny Sutcliffe are two guys that Galway even struggled with last year in the first half of that Leinster Championship, and I'd mark both of them at club level. They're both really good in the air as well. So Dublin have no shortage of including Rush, no shortage of options.
Yeah, and I think your best option isn't even on the Dublin hurling panel, to be honest with you. And I think if Con was in with the Dublin hurlers, I think he could be doing exactly what Gillane is doing with the Limerick hurlers. You could put in that type of a ball into him and know that he's going to probably win it over his man. Like remember, case in point, was it the Lee Mellows game, the All-Ireland semi-final 2 years ago down in Thurles? Some brilliant catches. Then you look and see how he can do it in the football against Roscommon last year in the Super 8s, when I think the whole world thought he was after doing his cruciate the way he came down, but he was able to get up that high and be able to come down like that. So like when you have someone like that, same as Gillane, you have a lad that can do it anyway. Really, he can put in the great ball on the ground, and from a defensive point of view, you're saying, oh, just put pressure on and make the lads hit it in high. But if you can do it like that coming in high, what do you do? Yeah,
TJ Reid is obviously going to be at the very top end of this conversation, and even the ball he caught against Tullaroan in the first round of the championship in Kilkenny to set up the equalising goal for his brother Owen, that just highlighted once more how good he is in the air. He had those 9 clean catches against Galway in the 2019 Leinster Championship. He's fairly imperious in the air. But Kilkenny always had and always will have great options in the air. You mentioned Wally Walsh when we were talking beforehand. Pádraig Walsh, of course, is very good in the air, and obviously historically you've Tommy, JJ, etc., not to mention even Shefflin, of course, as well. But Richie Hogan, I think when he's in the full of his health, and especially around 2014, 2015, I mean, what a hand he has on him as well.
Richie Hogan was a funny one because a lot of the time he didn't actually jump that high, but his man would often, I don't know too sure what way he used to approach the high ball, but often he would possibly make a movement and force his man to mistime the ball. And Richie would actually be, a lot of the time, just even from thinking back now, he'd actually still be nearly on the ground catching the ball, but he'd have it timed. He'd be barely off the ground, but he'd have it timed perfectly.
Is it that initial body position where he's actually got himself in a position where the ball is coming on to him and he's able to nudge his man away? And I'm not talking about fouling, but he's able to use his own body to keep his man away from it and allow it to go straight into his hand. No, he does climb up for it too, but I think like time and spatial awareness, the whole lot of when the ball's going to come down, just second to none there for a while.
And what's one of the best like attributes to have? It's the only time you can use it as a positive probably in life. Is, I'm not saying about Richie, I'm saying about lads in general, particularly as they go into full forward. If you have a bit of an arse on you and you're able to back into a lad,
you're from
like
the right county.
You can actually really use it to your advantage, in fairness, because you can position your body, like you can actually kind of lean back into your man and kind of fall back into him like that almost. Yeah.
So from Kilkenny then, are we saying TJ is the number one?
I think so, yeah. I think so. Any man that makes 9 clean catches in probably one of the greatest performances ever, individual performances ever given. He's in the conversation. He's in the top 3 conversation without a doubt.
And just a reminder, we're brought to you by 65hurls.com. If you need hurleys for the championship, that's the place to go. Johnny Glynn, he's probably the number one in the conversation for Galway. I think Conor Cooney's capable of catching the ball. Joe Canning, of course, and who'd forget that catch on the spin in 2015 against Kilkenny when he smashed it to the net. That ball travelled, God knows, 100 yards. To catch it over your head on the spin and still have the composure to finish was insane. But Johnny Glynn would have to get the vote here, wouldn't he?
Without a doubt. What was the main conversation point before the 2018 All-Ireland final? It was what are Limerick going to do with Johnny Glynn, because he absolutely destroyed Clare when the ball was given into him. Both of the days he destroyed them. Remember the great goal, the one-handed goal in Thurles in the replay semi-final as well. Just such a big kind of a bullock of a player, and just so, like, how do you try and manhandle him in the air? Like, if you're trying to compete in the air with Johnny Glynn is foolish, really. So in fairness, Mike Casey played it very, very well, but you'd love to have Johnny Glynn in your team. It's such a good out to have if you're in trouble. It's just,
and the fact that he's back for this winter All-Ireland as well. Imagine him catching ball in the winter close to goal, tougher to win ball. It won't be flying around as much as it would be in summer. I don't care if the pitches are still going to be good. The weather is going to affect the speed of the hurling. He could be a massive asset. And the team that they'll end up playing in the Leinster semi-final is Wexford, and they have 2 of the best in Lee Chin and Conor MacDonald.
Yeah, like everybody, if you think about like one of the great Wexford days outside of the Leinster final last year, was the 2017 Leinster semi-final when they beat Kilkenny down in Wexford Park, and Chin absolutely soared into the air a couple of those days. Like, there was a couple of catches there, like where if you were to get a still photo of it, you're probably looking at him being, 3 to 4 feet probably off the ground, if not a bit more. Like, he absolutely glides through the air. He's extraordinarily good through the air. And funny enough, though, as good as he is, I think MacDonald is even better. I think on the edge of the square, he's the closest you get to a throwback to the old full forward nowadays. I'm not too sure if it was that day or was it in league game against Kilkenny. Pádraig Walsh was in full back, and oh my God, a ball came in between the two of them, and it was a 5% ball for MacDonald, and all of a sudden he had a cut and a goal got. Despite, I think like Pádraig Walsh actually had his arms wrapped around him. And
I think that's why he was moved out of full back, basically. Like, it forced Cody to change what he was doing.
Yeah, like MacDonald's hand, I experienced it once while playing for Wicklow, and I got an awful going over, Cheney back, an awful going over. He was getting like even half decent high ball coming in. Like, what you want is Hail Mary ball coming in, having at least you have a chance. But there's a decent trajectory on it. You don't really have any chance. He's just the typical one where a high ball comes in, there's maybe a cornerback, a fullback, a corner forward, a full forward, a contestant forward, and MacDonald is just in behind or soars in behind and is through on goal. And again, he's another left-hander catching in his right hand. And if you can do that in the full forward line, you're one-on-one with goal. If you're able to catch from behind, you're one-on-one with goal. Probably not the same as a traditional left-handed catcher catching in front, and then you have to go around your man. But they have two brilliant options up in the forward line.
Yeah, and as you're describing Conor MacDonald there, some of that is making me think of Owen Larkin. Great hand on him as well over many years. There's a couple of teams in Munster.
He used to trip the hurl as well. He got caught a few times, but he used to trip the hurl. He'd get away with it sometimes as well. Just a tiny little tip.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was at me or what. We played Kilkenny down in Nolan Park one day, and he did it, and he got caught. I think Barry Kelly was refereeing it, and because he was true on goal if he hadn't been caught, but he definitely got away with it as much as he got caught.
Yeah, a few teams in Munster. So we mentioned that there's probably not too many standing out with Clare. I think Patrick O'Connor has a good hand, and David McInerney can. Of course, you mentioned Johnny Glynn in 2018 semi-final. He did have a tough time in him, whereas Mike Casey was able to sort of go another way and spoil him. With Cork, Colm Spillane, maybe he could be the guy to do it. Probably not too many standing out outside of Seamus Harnedy. Probably no one to really be at the very top level of this conversation. Tipperary, Ronan, Paddy Maher, they're in there. I think John McGrath has an underratedly good hand, and Seamus Callanan is going to catch ball as well, especially at this stage of his career. Wasn't really doing it at the very start of his career, but I think from sort of like 2014 onwards, he has become quite formidable in the air.
Yeah, on the tip boys, you wouldn't say any of them are at the very top bracket of the conversation, but importantly, they're all able to do it as well. The more than we talked about the flexibility of their positions and who's going to be playing full-back or centre-back or who's going to be playing centre-forward on a given day, they have 4 or 5, and the majority of them, because Dan McCormick can do it as well if he has to, Bonner can do it as well if he has to. They won't necessarily play that way where they're going to have to catch, a load of puck-outs or rain ball down, but if they have to, they can. And if you have to put a long ball into Callanan, he'll have absolutely no problem. As you saw that goal against, I think it was one goal anyway, definitely against Pádraig Mannion, that kind of come in from a high ball. The one actually where he broke his hurl off him in 15. They're all well able to do it. They don't try to make it their number one way of winning possession, but they can catch in the air if they have to.
And then finally Waterford, we haven't talked about them. And you know what? The era of Dan Shanahan and Ken McGrath, it's probably not really there anymore. And the only one, and Michael Brick Walsh, of course, should be mentioned in that conversation. But outside of maybe Kevin Moore to some degree, and I'm not sure he does it quite as often anymore, but he has been brilliant in the air over the years. Other than Austin Gleeson, I'm not really sure who can do those highlight reel catches anymore.
Yeah, Austin Gleeson, kind of when you look back at 16, the two semi-final performances there, a lot of that was in the air. I think the goal he got when Kilkenny actually switched Conor Fogarty onto him in the replay in Thurles in 2016, I think that was caught from a high ball and he sold it through and stuck it in the net. And he got a couple of great points from puckouts in the drawing game as well. But outside of him, yeah, as you say, I think Stephen Bennett has the capability of doing it. But there's no one that we've really seen do it for Waterford consistently over the last couple of years. So I couldn't have any of them definitely not in the final conversation anyway. Apart from Gleeson would be hovering maybe on the fringes, but I still think there's a good handful of lads probably maybe more proficient at it.
Right, so we need to do a short list and then decide. So I think Johnny Glynn has to be in there, TJ Reid has to be in there, Lee Chin or Conor MacDonald. You were sort of almost edging towards Conor MacDonald. And maybe Aaron Gillane, because when he does it, it can be so devastating, even in the first round for Patrick's well this year in the Limerick Championship. I think possibly both of his goals came off the back of high ball catches. I think even Conal Keaney deserves a mention in this as well. He's deadly in the air. Who are you going to go with?
Yeah, there's a couple of different types of lads there. Reid and Glynn are predominantly going to be half forwards where they're going to be snapping ball. We haven't really seen Conor MacDonald out in the half forward line, nor have we seen Gillane out in the half forward line. They're more snapping ball on the inside line, which it's probably harder to snap ball on the half forward line. But in saying that, I'm going to go with Conor MacDonald as the best paw I've seen. Broke onto the scene as an 18-year-old. Countless goals gotten from high balls, countless goals, even though teams know that that's his best asset. I wouldn't say he's probably not the fastest player in the world, particularly for an inside line, but with his hand it just gives him so many options, and he's so dangerous under the high ball. Again, the lads that are coming down into the final conversation are all lefties to me. Probably Conor Mac, Johnny Glynn, TJ Reid, Aaron Gillane, not lefty, but he's a left-sided player. But no, be Conor Mack for me, yeah.
Geez, I'm finding it very hard to decide here, and I can understand why you go Conor Mack, but I'm going to put it between TJ and Johnny Glynn. Johnny Glynn because, like, actually same as TJ, who can really catch a ball over them? It doesn't really happen that often. I think it's just about going to have to be TJ. Yeah, even though I think Johnny Glynn is unbelievably difficult to stop, he is a goal threat, and he has, I think, something like 7 or possibly 8 championship goals over the course of his career. I think TJ Reid more frequently is going to actually do that damage, and crucially he's going to do that damage in the half forward line and the inside line. Like, he could catch a ball in the half forward line and he's setting up a goal, and a second later catch it on the inside line and he's scoring and assisting. So I think I'm just about going to give it to TJ Reid, but as ever, people out there, feel free to let us know if you think we're wrong. So we kind of have a talk through there, haven't we? We'll nearly.
I think the last point you made is crucial though. That TJ can do it in the half forward line, and if they had to, they put him in the full forward line.
Yeah.
But I still just think there's a highlight reel of Conor McDonald goals from high catches from minor 21 all the way through senior, and he's still doing it now.
Okay, and don't forget, we're brought to you by 65hurls.com. Go get your hurleys there, and if you disagree with us or if you agree with us, please let us know in the comment section.